Hey everybody, Wayne here. In today's overview and review, I'm taking a look at Irish Freedom, designed by David Kershaw and published by White Dog Games. Irish Freedom is a solitaire wargame covering both the Irish War of Independence that occurred from 1919 to 1921 and the Irish Civil War from 1922 to 1923. It is made up of two games that can either be played separately or combined into one. In the War of Independence, you play as the Irish rebel forces, represented by these green and blue Irish counters, against the British, represented by primarily by the red counters and the few orange counters. In the Civil War, you play as the Irish Free State, represented just by the blue Irish counters, against the Republic Irish forces, represented by the green Irish counters. In both games, you will be recruiting forces and fighting the enemy on a map of Ireland divided into regions, and within each region, areas. Your goal is to reduce the enemy morale as quickly as possible so as to accrue the most victory points and hopefully achieve the historical result of a major victory. Let's do a quick overview. I already have a tutorial posted with a full playthrough for an in-depth look at the game. I'll cover my pros and cons, and then we'll wrap up with my final thoughts. First off, we'll look at the map. This beautiful map of Ireland, a nice green here, is divided up into boxes. The boxes for regions, Ulster, Dublin, Midlands. Not only are they named, but you can see there's a different number in a green die next to each name. But then within each region is going to be made up of areas. So let's go ahead and I'll zoom into Dublin, the Dublin region for you. You can see each of the areas also has different colors, and those are the three different terrain areas. They will impact combat particularly, and what they are cities, which are surrounded by blue, townlands, which is bordered by green, and then bogland, bordered by the brown. What you're going to be doing, and you can also see numbers within each of these areas, in addition to the roads in between the regions. What you're going to be doing is recruiting your units, and they're going to be popping up in different areas. Depending on the game you're playing, it's either going to be more random on the dice rolling, or in the later game, you're either going to pop up specifically in the city areas over here in Dublin. With your units, and let's go ahead and pull up a couple, and I'll have them pop up on the screen as well for a little bit of a closer look. Basically, each unit, and I already talked about the colors a little bit, in addition to some artwork and the name and then the nation flag in the bottom left, they're going to have three numbers. Those numbers correspond to their combat strength within that particular terrain. We talked about bogland, we talked about townland, we talked about cities. Going in order from top to bottom, those are their combat strengths. It also matches the colors, so the brown for bogland, green for townland, right? And then the blue for cities. So it's very easy to tell when a particular unit is in a different area or particular terrain area, it's going to have a different combat value. Very easy to add those up and look through them. As I mentioned before, there are the red units are the British, along with the orange units are technically Irish, but they are completely loyal to the crown. And then for the first game, the War of Independence, you're going to have all these Irish units, both green and blue, on your side interacting together, fighting against the British. But when you get to the Civil War, the game's gonna have you switch sides to the point where all those green units you had on the map are now your enemy, and you will have the blue units. The British are more neutral, although they will fight if any other Irish become involved or enter the same area they are in. They will then engage in combat. So, looking at the sequence of play here, very simple. Basically, and you skip the first two of the first turn, but that's okay. We'll run through them anyway. So you're going to go ahead and draw, it's called the random event phase. You're drawing a card. And when you're drawing a card, you're going to see the name of it up top. There's going to be some historical information, what happened in history. There's going to be a historical photograph, and then it's going to tell you specifically what's going on. For instance, reprisals, you roll a random area in each region, and the units in that area must immediately be moved to another random area. So you're going to be rolling to determine a region, rolling to determine an area within that region, and then in this case, those units would then you'd be rolling to see where they move. After that, you do what's called the treaty check phase. What that is, and that's tied into the goal, tied into victory, is that when you are, and depending on the game, it's slightly different, but basically the idea is in the first game, the War of Independence, you're trying to eliminate British units, as well as take over areas and occupy cities. In the Civil War, you're not looking to eliminate British units. Instead, you're just looking to stomp out and eliminate the Green, right, the enemy Irish, because you represent the Free State, right? They represent the anti-treaty forces, the Republican Irish. And you can see here you have markers for the morale. So every turn during that treaty check phase, or it also is called the surrender phase in the Civil War game, they're very similar with just some small differences, which are all described in the rulebook and in this player aid. You'll be keeping track of either British or Republican morale, depending on the game. And after it gets below 6, you're going to start rolling a 1d6. If you roll higher than that, that game will end. So the first game ends, you tally victory points, go to the second game. If it's the last game, the total games are over. Go ahead and check your total victory points and see how you did. Through that sequence of play, after the treaty check phase, so assuming a game is still continuing, right? You're going to do an upgrade phase where your opponent, the AI, is going to be upgrading forces, whether it's the British or it's the Republicans. They're going to be moving, and it's going to be random based on a D6, what area activates, and then there's rules determining where they're going to move. You then get your chance. You get your Irish turn to, which either the Free Irish, both of them in the first game, or Free State, move and recruit. So you're going to be able to move your forces around and recruit them. The first game, you only have 2 actions, so you don't have that many. The second game, you have 3 actions. Still not going to feel like enough, but that's what you get to do. Finally, the end turn phase, you're going to go ahead and check. If it's at turn 10, you haven't already won the game, that's an automatic loss, and according to the rulebook, you lose badly. Hopefully that's a good enough overview of the game. There's a few different moving parts. Hopefully I've explained everything well enough. Again, I have a full tutorial playthrough. Check that out if you want to see the game in action. Otherwise, let's get to the pros and cons, and obviously stop with my final thoughts. All right, pros and cons, starting with cons and then ending with pros. First off, luck is a huge factor in this game. You'll be trying your best to plan your strategic moves, recruiting your forces, engaging in battles, and you'll stack the deck right as best as you can. But simply put, sometimes the roll of the dice, will keep even your best laid plans from happening. Luck can rescue a poor effort, but it can also make something feel cheap. This game, it never feels cheap, but there are times the reliance on luck can be frustrating. Tied in with that luck, you're going to be rolling a lot of dice. Well, actually, you'll just be rolling a single D6 at a time, but you'll do it very frequently. You can see the dice on the map. Everything is really tied into rolling a 1d6. I found that for certain mechanics, they'll actually make you roll a 1d6 up to 3 times. And it's not necessarily all at once, right? It's kind of one after the other. One roll determines the next roll, determines the next roll. You'll probably want multiple d6s to help you keep track of your rolls. You can see here, I played with 2 usually. And along with that, unfortunately, the game doesn't even come with a single d6. Honestly, that shouldn't be a problem for most of us. I know I've got probably hundreds of these, dozens or probably hundreds extra d6s lying around. Just something to be aware of. All right, my pros. The graphical design, it's excellent. The box cover really stands out. The counters, while appearing, a little busy at first glance. I understand that if you're looking at them, you may look at them and say, I don't know, Wayne, there's a lot of information on there, a lot of graphics going on. I get that, but trust me, it contains all kinds of excellent gameplay information that you're going to need, while also really being enjoyable to look at. You'll learn very quick. The background color is going to tell you who is responsible for that unit. Who kind of owns it. You get the name up top, very quick, easy to read when you're sitting there playing. You have all those combat factors, but they're very clear, and the way they're color coded, right, according to the terrain, super simple, super easy. Along with that, the map, it's very attractive. It's just this beautiful, kind of subdued green color. It's not like a neon green or an obnoxious green, just a beautiful, subdued, natural green color all throughout Ireland. The region boxes, the different boxes for Dublin, Midlands, Ulster, etc., combined with the dice iconography on there, all the different dice, the green and red on here, the stuff that helps you determine random areas and regions to activate. They really stand out without being distracting. Simply put, great job by the artists, Jose Fora and Mark Mahaffey. The rulebook, It's a masterclass in wargame rulebook design. Clear, informative, succinct. The text is appropriately spaced. It's not all crammed together. You have an index here in the front. The text, you can see, easy to read. Even through the camera there, you can probably tell how kind of easy everything's spaced apart. None of the paragraphs are too large. It doesn't have all those. There's also these helpful sidebars, helpful notes on every page that act as reminders. It either has reminders for the rules, or it has, optional rules, or it just has bits of history in there. Just a wonderful job with the rule book. Speaking of history, the game is filled with it. From the designer notes in the back of the rule book to these event cards, that you draw and you look at every turn. There are photographs. Each one has a different photograph. There's those bits of knowledge, bits of information. It's just sprinkled throughout the entire game. Even if you know nothing of this conflict going in, and I'd probably say that was me, and I'll be totally honest, that was me, you're going to learn a lot about it. It's a natural progression as you move from one game to the other. Because again, the game is divided up really into 2 games, which it says you can play them separately, and you can, but they play so quick and they're so tied together. I really recommend you play them both. Play the War of Independence and go right into the Civil War. It builds that history. It creates a narrative. It tells you the history of what actually happened. The player aid that comes with the game, this may be the most, simply put, this most useful player aid I've ever seen come from a publisher. Now, unlike the rest of the game, there's nothing to write home about from a graphical standpoint, right? It's basically just text in boxes. But it's everything you need to know. It's almost everything you know, I guess I should say, that's useful for the gameplay, and to the point where you barely need to reference the rulebook. So how I learn my games, I read the rulebook all the way through, cover to cover. Then I play through part of a game, and I keep the rulebook close by. And I just reference it, all I need, usually quite a bit for the first game. But by the time I get into my second game, I kind of expect that at that point, based on how I learn and based on what should be a good rulebook and based on player aids, I should kind of be able to just play the game. Referencing the rulebook when needed, right? For clarifications or edge cases, things like that. This game fits that to a T, if not better. Once I had things going, I could just use this, this player aid sheet, run through the turn sequence, everything I need to do in each phase. Good to go. I feel that should always be the goal with a solitaire game especially, and Irish Freedom achieves that goal. The gameplay, it's smooth and easy. You'll find yourself, recruiting, moving your forces, and if you want to win, planning ahead during your phase. But your phase happens at the end of a turn. So the next turn, the enemy gets to act before you. And, combining the random events with their actions, you could see your plans go off without a hitch or be entirely disrupted. But what's nice is the more planning and strategy you put into your game, the more likely you are to succeed. Concentrating your forces, relying on terrain, Bogland, the brown is your friend, by the way, taking advantage of holding key areas like cities at just the right time. Don't try to hold them the whole game. Just take them kind of just at the right time. That's gonna assure you a victory, and sure sounds like the history of this conflict from what I've read and what I've seen, among other conflicts, right? Many conflicts are like that, especially with sort of the rebel forces style, and it's just perfectly simulated here. Okay, that's it for my pros and cons. Let's wrap it up with my final thoughts. David Kershaw and White Dog Games have put out one of the surprise hits of 2022. From the look to the gameplay, Irish Freedom is the complete package. It's not without its flaws, particularly how much luck drives your success or failure. Perhaps a more direct method to mitigate the luck would be welcome, and make sure your dice rolling wrist is warmed up, or you may sprain it. But knowing that going in, and if that's not a turnoff for you, which I think for most wargamers it won't be, you will find nearly everything else about Irish Freedom to be enjoyable. David Kershaw gives you a history lesson wrapped up in an exciting war game that keeps you wanting to come back for more. While playing this game, I found myself playing through an entire game, and I mean both the War of Independence and the Civil War, and then setting it right back up and going again. If that doesn't tell you how good of an experience Irish Freedom is, I don't know what will. All right, everybody. Thank you for watching this overview and review. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it educational and informative. Let me know your thoughts below, about this game. Have you played it? Are you now looking to play it? Or is it a game that you say, hey, based on your comments, I don't want to play? Please, either way, let me know in the comments below. Let me know about my video, how you liked it, this video, or my other videos on this game. And until next time, everyone, later.